think that's time. Okay, everybody please rise. Welcome to the Wright Town Council meeting of January 15th, 2019. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson.
Here.
Councilperson Thomas Nardi. Councilperson Jill Axelrod.
Here.
Councilperson Tony Baxter. And Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Present. Tony and Tommy are both excused. They had other commitments this evening that could not be avoided. We'll go out of order for 1 minute regarding the adoption of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on December 18th, 2018. If there are no additions or corrections, may I have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. So listen, there are only 3 of us here tonight. So somebody has to make a motion, somebody has to make a second. We can't wait for anybody else.
Flip-flop. We'll see if we can keep track.
Okay. First item is a presentation from Denisha Williams regarding signage for Crawford Park. Denisha?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I am here this evening specifically to give you an update on where we are with the design and procurement process for the new signage for Crawford Park. Just to kind of briefly refresh your memory and update you, the last time we were here speaking to the council, we had worked with staff and a committee headed by Supervisor Zuckerman to come up with a kind of an overall program of different coordinated signage throughout the park with the purpose of helping to improve visibility of the park at the entrance, as well as better communicate with the public, create better safety in some areas, and just also to improve the overall aesthetics by having more coordinated signage. And so this is kind of the general outline of what we had come up with in terms of different types of signs, what we're calling a large place marker sign, which would be at the main entrance only. Smaller place markers such as at the mansion, the community center, at the pavilion, and those would be the main locations there. Park rules signs that would be at strategic locations, and then wayfinding, and then a couple of smaller, what we call single ideas, or even a very small, like 8 by 10 little small voice for very specific needs. So since that date, we advanced the design. We did a very detailed walkthrough with the committee and looked at locations where we felt signage is needed. In some cases, we went back and decided, well, maybe we really don't need signs at this location, so we pared several down. As you can see, so we're looking the Northridge entrance would be over to your right on this plan, and then we'll be coming up the drive, and obviously there are more signs concentrated at the center of the property where we have the pavilion, the mansion, the pavilion, the playground, and then fewer signs as we exit the park. So overall, what we've been doing is we have refined the design of the main entrance sign based on the feedback that we got from council and the committee. And this is, I think everyone agreed last time when we were here that definitely the town's logo is important to have on there. And so this is the current proposed design for the main entrance sign. And to refresh your memory, that would be the approximate placement of the main entrance sign, along with new landscaping that would help to draw attention in a positive way to where the entrance is, which is currently rather difficult to find, so we want to improve on the visibility as a whole. The community center, this is an example of the smaller placemaker sign that we're proposing for the main locations within the park, the main destinations. And just dropping it in on a photo to give you a sense of what the placement might be and generally what the scale would be, what it would look like. This is not a complete redesign of the plantings, which we still will be dealing with for the spring, but just a sense of scale. The picnic pavilion, another sense of scale for how that would drop into the landscape. And then kind of a close-up of two of the rules signs. The one would be the main park rules sign that would be repeated at strategic locations throughout the park. And then the one that we're looking at on the right would be a single sign that would be specific to the playground. So more specifically, the playground rules. Just another, that's not the exact location, but just a sense of the scale of the rules sign. It would be a more pedestrian-oriented scale, so as opposed to the vehicular scale of the front entrance sign. And then kind of a sense of how the scale would interact with the existing playground too. So it's, there's a lot going on at the playground, so it would be close up to the entrance. And then a sense of what some of the other smaller signs would be like. The one on the left is the one that we're calling the wayfinding sign. So that would be only at a couple of strategic locations, like at the beginning of the entrance to just after you enter the park, and then another one closer as you approach the new parking areas, so to help people better understand where the parking is located, where the community center is, where the pavilion, ball fields, restrooms are, if they're not familiar with the park already. And then the single idea sign would be this one, such as the children playing, please go slowly. And then the really small voice sign might be something like the fountain sign, asking please not drink out of the water feature. And
Denisha, on that one, we have to change that particular one because we do want people to drink out of our regular water fountain.
right.
So that would, you're talking about the water feature.
Yeah, water
We
feature.
won't call it a fountain.
Okay.
We'll call it something else.
Water feature, yes. Good point. And then also, so this is just a sense of the ones on the right that have the directional sign and the location sign might, and the children playing might all kind of interact together. This would probably be one of the few locations where you might see three signs at the same time. Otherwise, they would be pretty spread out. And then, so just in conclusion, this is a summary of the proposed different types of signs with a more fully fleshed out rendering. And we have, what we're recommending at this point is to, in addition to going ahead, we understand that the town is probably ready to go ahead with the front entrance sign, if we understand correctly. And then we're recommending that we might want to go ahead with one of each of the other types of signs, somewhat as a test run. I mean, we think everything will be great, hopefully, but just rather than doing the entire program all at once, we might do the rules signs, one of each, the rules, the small placemaker, and one of each of the smaller signs. And we have issued, a request for proposals to get 3 quotes. We did get 3 really solid quotes, and it was also up on BidNet, so it was widely visible. And we need to do some more analysis, but right now it appears that a first run of the front entrance sign and one of each of the signs would be well under $10,000. So we're in our procurement, within our procurement policy to do it on an RFP basis. So that's kind of where we are now. In speaking with Debbie, I think the plan tentatively is to come back to you next month with a resolution that would be clearer about what we've found from our analysis
Right.
of the proposals that we got.
Yeah. One thing we're considering, I don't know if Debbie mentioned it, is to somehow keep the name of, Crawford Mansion in addition to the community center, or Crawford Manor House, because our thought was at our last meeting that it might be more, the second floor is really the community center part, but the use of the facility for weddings and other parties, to keep it more attractive, as, Crawford Manor might be a more attractive venue than having it at the community center.
Good point. We can certainly make those kinds of edits, so, that wouldn't impact the pricing, of course, that we've gotten so far.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
As far as the children, and I know this is something that I'm reiterating just because I believe it's important, the children playing the slow sign, is that going to be throughout the roadway?
Yes, so right now we have, I don't have the count in my head, but I would say there are at least 5 locations where we would be proposing to have that one. There's also a variation that we've talked about that we don't necessarily see here yet, that would be, for example, where the little trails cross the roadway, it would be more of a hiker symbol. So, or maybe you have a hiker and a child and a dog.
Well, I think especially near the field area, if anyone's driven there on the weekend when kids are playing sports and kind of running around, and that's the most important. And I know we had also discussed the last meeting, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to signs, but the speed bumps in certain areas along the road, maybe to coincide with the signage. Like I said, it's a narrow roadway. I think people forget that there are kids running around, and
Absolutely, and it's, let's see.
We may also, Denisha, we may also, right now, we have a 5-mile-an-hour limit. And we may also wish to have that with along with the slow, because I don't know how legally to define slow.
This is true,
I mean,
and
if
this
we're,
is something
if the police are going to be able to issue tickets, they have to say you're going 10 miles an hour in a 5-mile zone as opposed to slow. Well, 10 is slow.
Yeah, we've had a couple of long discussions about this. We had one discussion with Debbie, and in terms of pros and cons of how do you navigate that. And I mean, we'll certainly do it whichever way the town's direction is, whatever you feel is the message that you want us to convey. Clearly, we'll go there. So, and just on the speed hump issue, approximately, let's see, what is it I'm supposed to touch on this finger, or approximately where number 11 is, I think, where the little blue dot is right there. That would be one proposed speed hump, and then another one I believe is in the site plan, the architectural package. The site plan is another one, is just past that, and then I think there's another one maybe on the back side of the pavilion, if I remember correctly, close to where that new drop-off area is. So definitely, and each one of those would have its own sign that would say bump, so to help slow people down.
All right. Thank you. Jill, any questions?
no. Oh, Denisha, I'm sorry, before I forget.
Sure.
The one question, I think, especially because the color, you said it'll be, is it almost, it's a gray or a steel blue, or?
Yes, it's a gray blue that really coordinates with the roof of the mansion or manor house. Or
Would there be any lighting, I mean, especially obviously not on every sign, but especially on the Crawford Park sign, the main entrance, would we be putting any lighting, or even the mansion or community center sign?
Yes, a really good point. Definitely for the main entrance sign, lighting is part of the scope. It's part of our scope to put some lighting on there. And that's a good point about the other, especially the Manor House sign.
Yeah, because that's the only real, I think, location in the park that would be for sort of nighttime activity. The rest, the field house, the playground, obviously that's all daytime, but.
Right, and there might not be enough ambient light there to really emphasize it. That's a great point, Lindsay.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lindsay. Good point. Thank you, Denisha. Our first resolution is rescheduling the February meeting to February 12th, 2019. It was originally scheduled for a time when the Association of Towns is having its annual meeting, and many of us will be at the Association of Towns meeting during that period. So we're rescheduling to February 12th. May I have a motion and a second, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next one is designating the First Bank of Greenwich as an additional depository for the town of Rye. The First Bank of Greenwich is newly opened at 500 Westchester Avenue in Portchester, which is right on the Rye-Brook border, and is a welcome addition to the community, and we're adding them as an additional depository. May I have a motion and a second, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any questions? If not, call the roll on this one, Debbie, please.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod,
Yes.
and Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes, thank you. The next resolution, we're going to do it at the end. A resolution to authorize the conveyance of 2 town-owned parcels to the village of Rye-Brook. These parcels are owned by the town. They probably should have been transferred to the village of Rye-Brook some time ago, and in fact, the assessor had written a memo in 2015 recommending that this be done. Correct, Denise? And these parcels, one parcel is located on Westchester Avenue at Hawthorne and contains a flagpole. It's designated as a park and has been maintained by the village of Rye-Brook since at least the time I've been in Rye-Brook, which is, I guess, over 30 years. And the second parcel is on West Street that abuts Garibaldi Park, which is owned by the village of Rye-Brook and has been a park operated by the village of Rye-Brook. This parcel is between the West Street and the park. Part of it may be part of the park, technically owned by the village of Portchester, not owned, pardon me, technically located in the village of Portchester and owned by the town of Rye. And as a courtesy, I spoke to Mayor Falanka about this, and he had no objection. And of course, it's the town's right to transfer the parcels to whomever it chooses to. And in this case, it is the entrance to Garibaldi Park, so it is should be rightfully belong to the village of Rye-Brook for their park purposes. So with that, may I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion from the council?
I guess because I know Denise is probably familiar with it, if there was anything you wanted to add as opposed to.
Not really, it would benefit merging lots, merging ownership, makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Call the roll, please.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod,
Yes.
and Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes. The next resolution authorizes the town to enter an agreement with the county of Westchester for employee services. Debbie, would you like to talk about this?
Yes, EAP is an agency that provides a range of support services for town employees throughout Westchester County. Most of our, if not all, of our neighboring municipalities subscribe. And offering this to all of our employees should be a wonderful benefit, starting with an orientation that they'll provide for their services. They will offer programs in conflict resolution and stress management and leadership training. They will also do one-on-one counseling for our staff and their immediate family as well. So issues of substance abuse, issues of anxiety, these are all areas that EAP is particularly adept at administering. And I'm very excited about offering this as a benefit to our employees.
Thank you. Comments from the council on this at all? If not, may I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
I'll second.
Call the roll, please, Deb. I'm sorry,
Councilperson,
Hope. I'm sorry.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod,
Yes.
and Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes. And the next resolution is the town adopting the New York State updated anti-harassment policy against discrimination. Debbie, again, please.
Yes, so this policy was drafted by Heather Harrison, who is with our Labor Council attorney, Vince Toomey. She also worked together with the policymakers to create this policy. I should take a step back and say that with the passage of the state budget at the end of 2018 was the requirement that all municipalities adopt a new higher standard anti-harassment policy. It has many more protections for people who feel that they've been victimized of harassment, sexual harassment specifically. It has a new standard of training, and I would advise everyone that training is absolutely mandatory, including for all of our elected officials. So we'll be introducing that straight away, in addition to all kinds of protections, and for contractors, employees, etc. So our policy is completely in sync with the new standards that are required.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? If not, may I have a motion and a second?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Please call the roll, Hope.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod,
Yes.
and Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes. The next resolution is designating delegates for the 2019 Association of Towns meeting. That's the meeting to which I referred earlier that many of us are going to. And I'm pleased to say that our delegates, as they are most every year, are Judge Anthony Provenzano is our voting delegate, and Court Clerk Ann Capisi is the alternate. But I'm also pleased to announce that Tony Provenzano is scheduled to be installed as the president of the Association of Towns at the meeting, and we all wish him very well. So may I have a motion and a second for that?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Call the roll, Hope.
Councilperson Lindsay Jackson,
Yes.
Councilperson Jill Axelrod,
Yes.
and Supervisor Gary Zuckerman.
Yes. Before the reports, public comment period. Are there any members of the public that wish to address the town council on items not on the agenda? I see we have one person. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Bart Didden. I reside at 123 Betsy Brown Road here in the village of Portchester. I come before the council tonight to discuss or present my view about tax certiorari's and the effect that they have on our villages and the town. I understand that the village of Portchester has three of its more sizable properties that are in the tax cert cycle, the Mariner, the Castle, and the Lighthouse. And these buildings were built without any pilots or any real assistance from the taxpayer, but now can become a significant burden should they prevail in court on their claim that they're being taxed unfairly. What I want to stress tonight to the council is that a lot of this is avoidable if we took a more proactive stance in working with the taxpayer and aggressively, if there is no early on settlement, moving it to the trial calendar to stop the applicant's ability to continue to pile years on the process. It's really two parties that are involved in this process. There's the assessor who uses their best education and knowledge and approach, who may or may have not gotten the assessment wrong. But then you have the attorneys on behalf of the applicants, and there's money there. If we strip out the ability for these attorneys to get 4 years of refunds where they get half of their savings, or maybe negotiated less, maybe a third, if we take the money out of the process and we quickly adjudicate or come to a negotiated settlement after 1 year or two, because we know they're in the pipeline from the first year, then the property owner who, yes, they may be unfairly treated in the assessment that they were given, and it can be corrected, but part of the burden will go back on the property owner, that they're going to have to go out and pay an attorney to prosecute their claim. Instead of, right now, the attorney sends out a letter, we think you're overtaxed, sign here, cost you nothing. They let it run 4 years, 5 years, sometimes more, and then the communities get whacked on the refunds. So I come tonight to ask your focus and action to become more aggressive, not to not be fair. If the assessment is wrong, let's correct it. But become more aggressive in stopping the money flow, stopping the business of certain law firms that specialize in this, because it's a free money grab. And as long as we get the money out of it, the taxpayer, while they shouldn't be assessed incorrectly in the beginning, they have to put some skin in the game. And if we sat down and negotiated with them at the first filing or at the second year, we can avoid, the larger hits. So I thank the supervisor and the council for their time tonight and attention to my plea. But the Village of Portchester, which I happen to be a trustee, we don't plan, we don't budget for these things. And you look at the newspaper, the school districts don't budget or plan for these big hits. And we need your assistance. We need your leadership. We need your help. And I think the solution is simple. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Didden. I'm glad you raised those issues, because the very things that you spoke of tonight are things that we're already working on. You may not be aware of it, but number one, we hold quarterly meetings with the school districts and with the villages. Rybrook, Portchester, Blindbrook, Portchester School District, Rhinex School District. on a quarterly basis. We bring them up to date on every tax cert that is pending before the town. We give them an estimate of when the case may be settled, what the possible settlement is, and we do this for the express purpose of enabling them to budget accordingly when the budget season comes around, which is now. Our next meeting is January 29th with each of those entities. We maintain an extensive spreadsheet internally, which we share with them, as to every single pending tax cert and what the status is. In addition, we have taken an aggressive position by starting to require any taxpayer we choose who files a note of issue. We have a period of time. We have started to demand that their books be subject to audit by our professionals, and that occurred for the first time a couple of months ago now. And as a result, the Rye Ridge Shopping Center, which is a very large taxpayer in the Portchester School District, withdrew its two earliest years at issue, which were the largest years at issue, with potentially the largest payback, and they don't have any notes of issue pending at the current time on their properties. We're taking that aggressive stance with every single property owner. In addition, I've met with both Shelley Mayer and Steve Otis, along with representatives of the districts and the villages, to discuss possible legislative solutions. One of the legislative solutions is cutting back from 4 years to 2 years the time at which a note of issue can be filed. You correctly point out that years pile up because they don't have to file a note of issue until 4 years have passed. We're asking that to be reduced to 2. Currently,
For commercial properties.
yeah, basically we're dealing with commercial properties because the residential properties are settled every year. The town has the right to file its own note of issue. The drawback to that is that we have to get a full trial appraisal, which is very expensive every time we do that. So we've requested again that legislation be changed so that we do not need to file a full trial appraisal, and so that we will in fact start to file our own notes of issue on those cases that we deem appropriate on every single case as it hits the 2-year mark, rather than waiting 4 years. So we are acting aggressively. Those tax certs that have not had notes of issue, I've directed the attorneys to our tax cases, Dan Tartaglia and Jeff Binder, to aggressively negotiate with the taxpayer. And we have a on staff with Denisha last year, Gordon's on about a year now, who's an experienced commercial appraiser. So before we do anything, we get a fairly accurate reading of what the property's worth, whether we think it's fairly assessed or not fairly assessed. Those properties that we deem are accurately assessed, we're pushing, and we're not going to settle at a detriment to the town. So all of those things are being undertaken right now, even as we speak and as you've come here. We've taken an extremely aggressive position on all of these tax certs, and we will continue to do so.
I would also like to include that this has been discussed at length over the previous year, especially in regards to commercial properties. And Gary has been very proactive along with my fellow members of the board. We also passed a resolution and following up lobbying our state electeds to move forward with changing some of the laws and regulations regarding tax certs on the state level. And I believe some of our school districts and municipalities followed suit? I'm not sure.
I think they may have passed some resolutions. Ours were very specific. Jeff, do you want to add anything?
I think Trustee Didden's observations are great. And I think that I think one of the important things you should know in terms of, I think one of your strongest points made was about budgeting, because that's key, right? The school district budget and the village budget. So our quarterly meetings and actually our numerous offline conversations that I have with the village manager and with the, the business manager of the school district, a lot more information over the last 2 years has been opened up to them so that they can budget, so that the school district, for example, can reserve funds and anticipate what these refunds are going to look like if they come. The spreadsheet that Supervisor Zuckerman was talking about is available also to the public. It's not just internal. We've made it public on the website. So you can see all the tax cert cases and all the information up there, and we update it pretty regularly. So you can track to see how we're kind of whacking the cases out, and we are chipping away at the number of cases that we're carrying. That's not to say that with each new filing year, new ones crop up. And should we attack them in the early years? Absolutely. Good point, and we are.
Yeah, we're preparing a list of all the cases that have been settled or discontinued in the last year, and a number of them are substantial and at great savings to the taxpayers. Some of the largest tax cert proceedings, especially in the village of Portchester, have been recently withdrawn. I'm not prepared to give the names out right now when we publish it, because I don't know that I've seen the actual discontinuance from the court. But a number of very large ones have been discontinued, and some others have been settled favorably to the town. So we are working on this. This is an issue that comes up repeatedly I think in many towns, but I think it's fair to say no town in Westchester right now is pursuing it more aggressively than we are. Denise, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, if I could go to the mic,
Sure.
because I gotta do my report anyway. Thank you, good evening, everybody. I'm the assessor for the town, and I agree with your sentiments exactly, and we are moving in the right direction. Couple of things are that the number of cert cases have been reduced over the past several years. When I first started, there were about 200. We're down into a little under 150 range. So over time, the cases have been settled. People have not been refiling. I don't want to say we're making it hard to do business in the town of Rye, but I think the people who are filing are starting to see how serious we are, and we're requiring income and expense. We're making them do their job. And so hopefully the frivolous filings are starting to go away, but the other filings we're taking very seriously, and we're trying to, cut them off as soon as we can to so-called stop the bleeding when we can, as much as possible. So that was my 2 comments regarding that.
Let me just, if I may, just sort of elaborate that. I see 3 main issues. Number 1 is communication between the village and the town, communication about these tax cert cases so that they're not dropped on, the village during budget season and no one's surprised. We're making headway on that. We're sort of pulling back the curtain. Over years, it's been a mystery, and it's been, it's sometimes really hard to understand, and then all of a sudden, the school district or the village is faced with this, refund. So we're getting at that. We're getting information out early, so hopefully the budgeting process is better. That's number 1. Number 2, the litigation posture, definitely more aggressive. Definitely trying to, nip these cases in the bud. But we're also at the same time trying to work our way back to the ones that, on the ones that have multiple years, okay? While at the same time letting the stakeholders know what could be coming down the pipe. So removing this air of mystery and telling them what we're doing, I think has gone a long way. But there's obviously more work to do. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
You know, there's another aspect to this too, and that is, before you continue with your report, Jeff, we have a February 1st date for redemption. Those taxpayers who have not paid their taxes, this is the other side of the coin of the tax cert. This is our being aggressive to take properties, especially commercial properties that have not paid their taxes, and to sell or otherwise dispose of them. You heard just tonight we're transferring properties to the village of Rybrook. We have other properties. I've spoken to Portchester about possible properties that they may be interested in. And others are just going to go up for sale. So we're being aggressive on all fronts. And Denise? Go ahead.
Ready for my
Yeah,
report?
ready for your
Okay.
report.
Just a couple of brief things. I'm happy to report some good news to start off 2019. First of all, New York State Department of Tax and Finance once again certified us at 100% of market value. And the benefit of that is that it's easier to understand your assessment. For example, if you lived in the city of Rye, they have a 1.53% residential assessment ratio. So if your assessment were $25,000, you would divide it by the 0.0153 to get an assessment of $1,633,987. So it's hard to understand that math, and that's most of Westchester. So 25.
I'd rather have a $25,000 assessment than $1 million assessment, right?
Right, but when you get a $25,000 assessment, you really don't know where you stand until you do that fuzzy math. And we are in a much better position, because if your assessment is $500,000 and you feel you could sell your house for $500,000, you know you're in good shape. If you could sell your house for only $400,000, then it's time to come in and talk to the assessment office. The other thing is it's easier to apportion assessments and tax rates between tax levying bodies like school districts. So if you have Portchester School District with two villages at 100%, it's easy, cut and dry. When we have to do a calculation for the Rye Neck School District, we have the City of Rye, E-grade, and our homestead rates, and it's a huge calculation for the Rye Neck School District. Also, the benefit is that there are no freezes in the small claims assessment review residential grievances and for the tax certs. So in other communities that have the E-grade and the residential assessment ratio, there's a 1-year freeze on residential reductions, and there's a 3-year freeze on tax certs. So we have the ability to change and look at assessments every year and try to get them where they're supposed to be. So that was the first good news. The second good news is that as of today, all but one of our small claims assessment review cases have been settled, and this is an all-time record, which I'm really proud of. I orchestrated a demanding schedule of the staff so we could get these done, and what happened is we were at the Westchester County Tax Commissioners Annual Conference in November, and we heard that it was really difficult for municipalities to get court dates because the court has less hearing officers and they're devoting less time to this. So immediately I got an email out to the court, said let's get these on schedule, get them on schedule. We had a couple of cases in December, and then the bulk of our cases were scheduled for today. So what happens in between is we settle them, and the representative and homeowners' backs are kind of up against the wall to get things moving, because otherwise they let it drag out. And so we ended up with 8 cases in court today. We'll see what the judge decides, but I have a good feeling about how those will turn out. And I wanted everything wrapped up by mid-January because we have Tyler coming in to do the reval, and wanted to be ready for them. So all of that's working out great. And the SCAR process is really Gordon and Rocio's baby, so to speak. And I just want to say they've done an awesome job. All their hard work has been terrific, so I wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out. So that's basically the end of the good news, but I also wanted to reiterate with regard to the tax certs that the reval focus, the first half and the major portion of the reval is going to be on commercial properties.
Stole my thunder because I was going to raise that next.
Sorry.
Nope, that's
I wanted
okay.
to
You're the
bring that
assessor.
up before,
Nope.
but I forgot. So all of that's good news, and that's really all I have to mention for this evening. So thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Again, I would want to mention that the reval is now beginning, and that will also take a large burden off the tax cert process, because if done correctly, the property owner will realize that his property is accurately assessed, and that should cut down the number of filings, hopefully. Or, if it doesn't cut it down, it'll give us additional ammunition when we go to court to justify the assessment.
And just to add to the entire tax cert discussion, and to reiterate to Mr. Didden, I guess you're not trustee tonight, you said, right? But just to reiterate that our doors are always open as far as hearing from the municipalities, school districts, et cetera, especially when it comes to this issue and the impact
Absolutely.
that these pending certs have. So, like I said, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to divulge or share any information with the village of Portchester and any of the other municipalities.
Thanks, Lindsay. I see Nick getting up. Mr. Receiver, your report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the Town Council. Nick Mecca, Portchester Receiver of Taxes. Just have 2 points tonight, which are not happy ones, as Denise said happy, but they can be if everybody gets on board. In 2 weeks' time is the final payment for your school tax. Now, come February 1st, if you haven't paid, it has a 10% penalty. And people that have faced that penalty realize that it's very, very steep. Number 2, Village of Brook, it's time for your second installment, not due till February 28th, but I mail them out now to save the 5% tax postage increase. So I have all my stuff out early to avoid that.
When does that go into effect, Nick?
January
postage-
27th. So
The postage increase?
yes.
So everybody go out and buy your forever stamps now.
Yes. Okay, everybody, and get the checks in, please, so we can get all the books square. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Hope your town clerk's report is filed. Anything to add? Nothing. Dave, finance report? No, just what you filed. Thank you. The highway report has been amended. I noticed that there was a slight error. The Otter Creek Bridge is in need of repair. We had Debbie send out, did you send out Dolph's report to everybody?
Yes, we
Yeah.
got it this
We
afternoon.
all have Dolph's report. What they call the wing wall is in need of serious repair. And I've spoken to Debbie about looking for a grant. I don't know if we need a whole new bridge there. But we're going to most likely apply for a Bridge New York grant, just like we got one for the
Hillside Avenue.
the Hillside Avenue Bridge in Mamaroneck. And we're going to go forward with that. Debbie, we're also going to be painting the Continental Bridge.
That's correct. If you recall, we had passed a resolution a month or so ago awarding the contract to paint the bridge to a firm that subsequently withdrew their their offer. I have since spoken with a painting contractor that we've used in a number of other projects, and that has been very generous with their community service work. And they submitted a preliminary proposal to me last week, which was superb and well below our procurement standard for getting competitive prices. I'm waiting for a revision to make sure that they can meet our certified payroll and prevailing wage requirements. And based on their original proposal, I think we'll be well able to pass another proposal, another resolution at the next month
Okay,
and
great.
continue.
Okay. I assume we're not going to paint it in the wintertime, though. All right, very
But as
good.
soon as the weather is appropriate, they can get working.
I guess that completes our agenda. The next thing is any comments from the council people? In this case, council women.
Well, I just want to say this weekend, actually Sunday evening, I had an opportunity to attend the Martin Luther King Jr. ceremony with Gary, and I just want to
Tommy.
and Tommy, yep, Tommy was there, and I just want to commend everyone who did such a wonderful job with that event and all the honorees. Definitely carry out the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with their work, so thank them for their service to our community as well.
Thank you. Joe, anything? Nothing? Our next meeting is, I don't have anything tonight. I've said what I had to say. Our next meeting will be in Portchester on February 12th. So with that, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you, and good night, everybody.
See you now,